young officer, a lost fortune, a suicide note, and one single word that changed everything. Welcome to the Sebcast, the place where we turn our beloved stories upside down, where we look at what history might have overlooked and where we newly discover and grow together in John 13:12-7. What happens when you reach the end of the road, when your mistakes catch up with you and there is no way out? Today, we tell the story of Tsar Nicholas I, a desperate soldier, and what happens when debt is fully paid. It's not just a story of financial ruin, it's a story of grace, redemption, and a single moment that changed the course of one man's life forever. It's a freezing night in Russia in the early 19th century. A young officer sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on the books before him. He was entrusted with managing the salary fund for his regiment, but things have gotten out of control. Gambling initially seemed like an innocent pastime, a little bit of excitement, but small losses became significant losses. He started taking money from the government's funds, convinced he could win it back. He never did. The figures before him were unmistakable. He hadn't just lost his own money, but an enormous amount that belonged to the Tsar's army. The debt was astronomical, far beyond anything he could ever repay. The next day, the books would be audited. The truth would come out. There would be no trial, no mercy. Shame, imprisonment, or worse, awaited him. He reached for a pen and wrote one last sentence under the terrible total. Great debt, who can pay it? Tired, without hope, he laid his head on the desk. He had decided to end his life by that midnight. But as he sat there, his eyes fixed on the damning figures, sleep overtook him. That same night, Tsar Nicholas I, who sometimes liked to disguise himself as an ordinary officer and inspect his troops, walked through the barracks. He saw a light still on in one of the rooms. Curious, he stepped inside and found the young officer fast asleep at his desk, with the suicide note fresh on the page. His eyes glided over the figures, over the desperate plea scribbled at the bottom of the ledger. Great debt, who can pay it? Something stirred in him. The Tsar picked up the pen and, under the question, wrote just one word, Nicholas I. Then he turned and quietly walked out. The young officer woke up the next morning. The crushing weight of his situation hit him again, but then he saw something, a name, the name Nicholas I. His hands trembled as he compared it with the official documents in the barracks. It's genuine. The Tsar himself was here. Even more incredibly, when the treasury was audited later that day, he discovered that Tsar Nicholas I himself had already paid the exact amount of his debt. This is grace. It's not just a nice idea, but a radical, earth-shattering reality. The young officer had no way out, no way to redeem himself. And yet, in a single moment, everything changed. Not because of what he did, but because someone else was willing to do for him what he couldn't do himself. The truth is, we all have debt, maybe not financial debt, but moral debt, a debt of pride, selfishness, and mistakes we can't undo. We ask, who can pay? And in the silence of our despair, an answer is written not in ink, but in blood. Grace is not earned, it is given. The question is, are we willing to receive it? We are being sent in love. Until next week, take care.